Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 365 Explained. My name's Zach, and I'm here with Ben. And today we have chose a topic of Power Automate. So we're going to be having maybe a little bit of a 101 discussion around what Power Automate is, the different types of flows that you can expect. So good place to start, Ben.
Yep.
What is Power Automate? And hello.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're saying this is like a 101 because we were like, yeah, no, we'll cover Power Automate and then explained. And then the more we've dug into it, the more Power Automate is kind of starting to interconnect a lot of the M365 suites, and there's a lot of nuances and complicated stuff. So I imagine we'll be revisiting this down the line. But yeah, to your point, Power Automate is a automation platform that kind of sits at the heart of the Microsoft Power Platform stack. And to preempt your follow-up question about, well, what do you mean by the Power Platform stack? Power Platform is kind of you're used to having the productivity side of M365, of the Microsoft stack is M365, the infrastructure side is Azure, and then Dynamics is kind of the business process and productivity with, CRM and all that sort of stuff. And Power Platform, kind of sits across all of those things. It is the mechanism for doing things across all of those platforms in an automated fashion, I guess. So you have stuff like Power Pages, you have Power Apps, you have Power Automate, you have Copilot Studio kind of sits on there as well. So it's this kind of big suite of tools for doing things across your environments. Clear?
Very clear. Yeah.
I don't think so.
When talking about Power Automate specifically, I always kind of liken it to if this then that.
Yep.
So that was the first sort of thing when I saw Power Automate. I went, oh, it's a this and that, but for Microsoft stuff. That's kind of where that came from.
So I guess to dig into that, like if this then that is a web platform, right, where you have connectors to different services, and then you have triggers and you have actions, and you're absolutely right. Like Power Automate used to be called Flow back in the day. You now have flows are the things that run inside Power Automate. So you will still see in the UI kind of some references to that. But the notion of connectors is what makes this really interesting, because it doesn't just tie it into the Microsoft stack. So a connector is kind of a wrapper for two things. One is, I guess in an AI forward world, you would call it a skill, right? It's like how you go and talk to some form of API on the other end and the mechanism to do that. And the other bit in the wrapper is the credentials, how do you go and access that as me under my kind of current user context. So inside Power Automate, when you set up a connector, you can then use those as building blocks. And there are two kind of types of connectors or things that come from a connector. One is a trigger and one is an action. So a trigger is when I receive a new email, when a new item is added into a list, when a new page appears in Notion. I haven't used the Notion connector, so I don't know if that's in there. But the beauty of Power Automate is that you can add your own custom one. So if it's not, you could probably build something to do it. And then the action is do something with that information. So, when a new email arrives, flag it or move it into a particular folder. And, there's a lot of overlap across the Microsoft stack, right? Because you could do that kind of a thing via an inbox rule. Some of the stuff that we're maybe talking about, you could do through things like Copilot scheduled prompting, what have you. But Power Automate gives you a lot of flexibility to string multiple things together. So, the example of the email, I personally have a flow that I use. I use domain name, whatever company for the email address at mydomainname.com. And I have an inbox rule, a mail flow in Exchange rule that kind of rewrites them and redirects them to my actual email address underneath. But I have a Power Automate flow that logs each one of those domains that comes in. So I know, am I getting the most emails from Amazon, or is it from Microsoft, or is it from, whoever it is? That's a Power Automate that's sitting underneath saying, when I get a new email in, pass out who it's from or who it was originally sent to and write that into a Microsoft list. So I'm connecting my inbox against lists. And then I could have other connectors in there for things like I've talked about, I used Todoist in the past. Todoist is a completely external non-Microsoft service. I could have other elements in my kind of flow that go out to Todoist or go out to other stuff. So it's a way of kind of tying stuff together to provide you with automated or semi-automated workflows to kind of hopefully make your lives a little bit easier, or to automate particular business processes that you might be needing to do.
Yeah. And those types of flows that you're talking about there, when we talk about Power Automate, there are different types of flows that we can create within Power Automate, isn't there?
Yeah, so the standard type is, and they're called cloud flows. They
Yeah.
are, you generate them using the standard sort of web-based tooling, or inside Teams now, or wherever you create them. And they run in Microsoft Cloud land, right? So we'll touch on this in a little bit, but there are sort of particular Power Platform environments inside your tenant. They run in those Power Platform environments, and they do whatever they need to do and process the way they want. There is also the ability to have desktop flows. Now, this massively predates computer use agents that people might be more familiar with these days for AI, where your AI agent is actually able to interact with a browser or a desktop or whatever. Desktop flows are a precursor to that you can have Power Automate running as a desktop app on your machine, and it can interact with things on your machine on your behalf. So it can look for when a file changes on your desktop, or when a particular thing happens on your desktop, do something and do it in the context of not being kind of cloud-based and beholden to whatever cloud APIs are available, but it can interact with stuff on your machine. And there is a way of, you can even have that kind of hosted by Microsoft. So Microsoft will host you a kind of VM running Power Automate desktop to go and do stuff, but they can get quite expensive, So, but broadly speaking, most of the flows that you will be using are cloud-based flows, and there's some kind of fuzzy lines with things called generative flows as well, which is where you can have Copilot interacting with flows or flows interacting with Copilot. They're still really cloud flows underneath, because they're running, like I say, out there in Microsoft land on your behalf.
Yeah, those desktop flows that you mentioned are quite interesting. I've worked with a customer before with that, where they had like an agent CRM that they didn't have a connector for.
Okay.
So we used those desktop flows to effectively take the data out of, I think it was via an email, and get it into the CRM. So it went through, and we used that desktop flows to do that. So instead of having those, native connectors, we use that, which is super interesting.
And was that, you had that running on a machine in the corner, or that was, one of the like hosted versions?
It was the hosted version.
Okay.
Because it was more of a business process, that customer wanted. So it was kind of an unattended access thing that they wanted. But you can have, like you mentioned, attended ones as well, like on your machine.
Well, and that bit there about it's a business process. It's a good point, because there's a companion piece to Power Automate, which is Logic Apps. That's worth kind of mentioning. That Logic Apps are they use kind of the same engine underneath. They don't have the same interface for building them, and you can convert flows from Power Automate into Logic Apps. But Logic Apps are there for like actual business process stuff. You should think of Power Automate as personal flows, things that I need to do to make my day or my job easier. But if you have something that needs to operate all of the time and be kind of person proof, so if someone's account gets disabled, or licensing gets changed, or someone leaves an organization, or someone new joins or whatever, Logic Apps should be the place that you're running anything that relies on, or that supports multiple people in your organization. Now, you do see some organizations handling this in different ways, that they're more than happy accepting the risk or being unaware of the risk of having personal flows impacting business process, or they have service accounts that are running that, host the flow as a standard user. But just be aware that Logic Apps would be the proper bucket to kind of put those things in, and they're billed through as your, as your usage, as opposed to other forms of licensing.
Yeah, I see the Power Automate stuff as, this term went around a lot when Flow and Power Automate started, as in the low code, no code kind of option. Whereas Logic Apps is definitely, low code as well, but you have that ability to be more of a dev and do, more of that dev wrapper stuff with Logic Apps than you
Yeah,
do.
well, I mean, who are we kidding? We're all asking Claude to code our stuff these days, right? Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned before a little bit around environments. So maybe let's spend a little bit of time talking about, what those environments are and what people will need to know when they're creating
Yeah.
these flows.
So environments is something that I hadn't paid much attention to until I needed to put something on a preview program, and I had to have a specific preview power platform environment. If I hop open my screen share, what I'll do is if you go to make.powerautomate.com, this is where you can kind of see your personal flows. And we're very used to up in the top right hand corner, you've got your little profile picture. You can see the account you're signed in with. But what you might notice just to the left of that is there's actually a drop down toggle for selecting different Power Platform environments. And it is Power Platform environments, not specifically Power Automate environments, because it's like you can create kind of whole containers, if you like. And on my environment, you know, if you're watching the video, you can see I've got my BibleNet default environment, BibleNet being my tenant. And then I have one called M365 and one called Preview, which are different kind of containers inside. If you go to the Power Platform Admin Center, which is at admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com, this is where under the Manage button on the left-hand side, you can see all of the different environments inside your tenant. So the way to think of it is that the tenant is the security boundary. That's the thing we're very used to, right? You know, it's where our user accounts live. It's the container for all of that sort of stuff. Whereas the environment is a boundary around the kind of different costings, if you want to apply costings, but also for different data demarcations and the security boundary, so that you can have stuff kind of contained inside its own environment. And one of the things that's becoming more and more important with people creating agents inside Copilot Studio and that kind of stuff is being able to gate access to the cost of resources. So, you know, how much kind of agent compute time or credits or consumption are you wanting to use? So having different environments for that is a way of handling that. My organization, we have different environments for kind of the default is where if anybody wants to go start creating an agent, that is where they can do that. It's like a little play space. But if you need something that's then going to actually be deployed and used in production, it gets migrated into a production ready environment where it has access to more resources. You know, we can control and track the spend on it, all that kind of stuff. So that's where, you know, environments are come into play. And you also can, like I say, use them for different release cycles. So on the screen, I've got my preview environment you can see listed is down as specifically as a developer type environment. It's actually in a different region to my main tenant. So this is against the United States region, and I've chosen to put it into an early release cycle group. So similar to rings that we're used to in kind of other aspects of the Microsoft Update lifecycle, you can put them into different containers for how quickly they receive updates and, you know, have access to preview functionality. So that's kind of the gap is tenant is your security, environment is a particular container for Power Platform type resources.
Okay. So we spoke a little bit about, those environments. What about licensing specifically for these types of flows and Power Automates? What does that look like?
So we'll skip over Logic Apps because that's kind of licensed on an Azure credits and usage type point of view. If we're concentrating purely on Power Automate, a standard M365 license, most of them give you access or the ability to use Power Automate. The trick is that there are actually two kinds of those connectors that we talked about. You have standard connectors and you have premium connectors. Standard connectors are included in the default Power Automate licensing, and premium connectors have their premium. There's a specific Power Automate license that you need to be able to use premium connectors. Now, this does get a little fuzzy because if you're using Copilot Studio and you're licensed through M365 Copilot for using Copilot Studio, you can use premium connectors inside an agent workflow without having to have a Power Platform premium license. So those connectors are licensed via the M365 Copilot But then that gets a little bit more fuzzy because there are fair usage and limits and other stuff kind of attached with that. But the thing to note, if we're just talking about standard kind of Power Automate, is being aware about those premium connectors. I mean, if I on my screen go inside a flow, the UI that you have kind of draws out the way these connectors are. If you hit on any of the kind of pluses, you can see visually when a connector is a premium connector because it has a little diamond against it. So on my screen, I've got built-in tools like Mail or Excel Online or Microsoft Forms, but there's a HTTP connector that has the little diamond on it. If I hit on the little info, you kind of can see a bit more information about it as to why it's a premium connector. So it's usually things that are kind of enterprise grade connectors. So things like Salesforce, they're premium connectors. Or it's stuff that has the additional cost to Microsoft to be running. So that HTTP one that I clicked on, that is a webhook type connector. So there has to be a thing sort of sat there for Microsoft listening for an incoming webhook call. That has a cost to them, therefore that's covered under the premium kind of connector, if you like. So, sometimes you can understand why stuff's a premium connector. Other times it's maybe doesn't quite make sense, and it's just, the organization that's providing the connector, because not all of these are first-party Microsoft ones. I mean, like scrolling down the list here, we've got, an abstract email validator. So there's clearly some sort of pricing happening at the other end. Adobe have premium connectors in here. So there's a kind of good old mix. Amazon S3 is a premium connector of stuff that is free and included. I say free is not quite right. Included under the default license versus premium is a cost to do it. But fortunately for us, if you're mostly living in the M365 kind of productivity world with your flows, most of the things that you would want to do, like, looking at an email, looking at a SharePoint list, looking at stuff inside Teams, they're covered under the standard connector types.
Yeah. And it's important. The people that need that premium Power Automate license are the people that are creating the flows, that are. So if you're the person that goes and is creating that flow, then you're going to need that premium license. It's not, everybody needs it or something like that.
Well, it depends who else is interacting with the flow, doesn't it? But generally, you're right. Like, if you have a flow that does something premium that outputs into Teams, not everybody in Teams needs to have the premium license. They see that because it's a thing that's happened inside Teams, right?
Yeah.
And then I guess speaking of Teams, that's a reasonable point to kind of mention as well, that on the Teams side of things, there's a new app, I guess, called the Workflows app that got introduced. That is a simple, straightforward way for people to be able to see the flows that they've got. So stuff like one of my favorite things that I use inside a Power Automate flow is the kind of adaptive cards and, post something into Teams and wait for a response. Workflows app is a way that you can see those things listed out, but you can also see the flows that you have created and built in your organization. So I'm just, if to find that, you hit the kind of 3 dots menu on the left-hand side inside Teams, and then you've got the Workflows app. In here under chat, you have the conversations that you've had with any, bots or agents. But down the bottom of the homepage, you will see workflows listed. They are your normal Power Automate flows that you've got. You can see the ones that I'm showing on screen at the minute. I've got a bunch of errors because I've got some old flows in there. That's because the connectors have expired. You remember the connectors is the APIs plus the credentials. My credentials have expired for them because they're all old flows. But the other interesting thing in here is we've got some options for templates. And some of them you'll notice have little Copilot icons on them. So there's actually a second category of flow in here that is an AI workflow. Now, this is a little bit like an evolution of Copilot scheduled prompting.
Yeah.
So one of the examples here that I've created previously is I've clicked on the help me wrap up my week and prepare for my next week, send me a summary in a workflows chat. And if I edit that, I've got when do you want it to run? Do you want it to run daily, weekly? What time do you want it to run? What days do you want it to run? This is the same mechanism as you would have had under prompt scheduling, but you've got it in two places. And if you create it in one, you don't see it in the other. And if you create it in both, you will have two running. But the other interesting thing in here is that these AI workflows, they're actually operating, they're essentially Power Automate flows behind the scenes, but you won't see them in the UI other than inside this Workflows app where you have created them. So they don't show up inside the standard Power Platform environment because, as I understand it, there's a hidden Power Platform environment that is being created when you generate these things, and Microsoft is creating them inside there. It's kind of like when we talked about Loop. Loop runs on SharePoint embedded when you create a workspace, and those are kind of hidden SharePoint environments. This is a similar thing, that we have a hidden default Power Platform environment that Microsoft is using to glue these things together to make them run.
I think this I mean, that's wildly confusing for me. I mean, the only thing I can think is, that maybe it will show up eventually and it will all, harmonize, and we will see things like these flows, these AI workflows show up in Power Automate as well. But again, it's a Microsoft-ism that it's not there right now.
Well, and I think this is, before, I think we'll wrap up just by showing a little bit of, what one of these flows look like. But this is kind of the other interesting thing. If you go into Copilot Studio, which is copilotstudio.microsoft.com, you have your agents that you've created, but we also have this thing called agent flows. So an agent flow is the ability to hook up output from an agent into a flow to go and do something. So my example, if I want to write something into a SharePoint list, or I want to create a summary of a document and generate a new Word document out of it, those can be Power Automate snippets of code that you run that happen inside Copilot Studio. I think the neat thing here is, like, this AI evolution, revolution, however you want to frame it. It's like Microsoft is very well placed with Power Platform, that it's got all of these different components behind the scenes for automating, for having connectors, for talking to stuff. Like, even in Copilot Studio, if you look at tools like MCP connectors and API connectors, those are actually Power Platform things happening underneath behind the scenes that enable it to go and reach and do this. And, again, super simply, if we look at one of the flows in here, you can kind of see how this stuff builds up really nicely. I've got my trigger, the RSS trigger here. I've got, I take the output from my RSS trigger and I put it into an HTML to text converter, which is just an action that's happening. These could be that I then add in, run a prompt. That's like effectively running a Copilot Gen AI prompt against the data that I've got in and out. So, I think there's a whole bunch here that we haven't really scratched the surface on, that we should probably dig into in a specific episode in future.
100%. And just to mention on that Workflows app that we have in Teams now, there's a lot of times where I'm speaking with people and they're trying to understand this AI agent kind of world and new thing that's here, and they think they want an agent when really what they want on the back end is a flow or a workflow to do something for them, whether that be summarize at the end of the day or summarize at the start of the day. What did I miss yesterday? What's on my to-do list? Instead of having agents, workflows can do that for you. So there's a little bit of understanding that needs to happen there between those two things. But like you said, we've scratched the surface of this. We can.
Yeah, well, and it's a good point. It's like, AI agents, you could easily say, your example there, find me all the tasks that I haven't completed, give me a summary of them, and help me plan my day for tomorrow. And that's a valid AI use case, because you might want to apply some smart stuff over it. But that is starting to have an increasing cost associated with it. We're recording this the week that Microsoft announced Copilot Cowork hitting GA, and Copilot Cowork is being licensed through Copilot credits. Whereas if you actually had a Power Automate flow that would sift out and find the tasks that are, past due, and then maybe you would do some AI processing on that, you've reduced the amount of AI tokens that you would need to use, because you've done it as a, effectively like a Microsoft version of a cron job that's gone and done the task and pulled you out the information. And then you're just passing over the information you need, rather than the AI agent having to say, go find me all the tasks. No, I don't need that one. I don't need that one. I don't need that one.
Yep.
So 100%, like Power Automate is, it's going to be interesting times.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that kind of one-on-one overview of Power Automate. And like you said, I think we can spend a lot more time, and you guys will probably see, more episodes around some of the specifics we spoke about today, because it really does kind of go down the rabbit hole.
Well, I think maybe Copilot Studio would be a good one for next time, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. So yeah, we'll kind of use the next episode as Copilot Studio. We're gonna be releasing this on the final day of Commsverse. So if you are around, please, if we've already not said hello, come and say hello to us, and we'll have a chat. But yeah, next episode we'll be talking about Copilot Studio. Thank you very much, Ben. Cheers.
Alrighty. Thanks, Zach. Catch you next time. Bye.